welcome to Unarmored Talk podcast, where we will have real life conversations that helps you develop an accurate way of thinking. And the way we're going to do this is by gaining a better understanding of how emotions, feelings, and thoughts can influence the outcome of a personal or professional challenge. I'm your host, Mario P. Fields, and today's guest, not really a guest for me, is my sister-in-law and my deceased brother's wife, Angie Fields. Angie, welcome to Unarmored Talk podcast.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you for
No,
having.
you're welcome. So tell the listeners and viewers a little bit about who Angie Fields is.
Okay. Oh well, Angie Fields. I'm from Pontiac, Michigan, born and raised. Um, have three children, two boys and a girl. And I was married for 16 years to my husband, my high school sweetheart, actually. Um, and he passed away 2 years ago now. So 2 years ago in a couple of weeks. So yeah.
Yeah. And this one is kind of a tough one for me. So and I know it is for you. So thank you, Angie, for agreeing to do this. And ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the topic, we are in heavy planning to incorporate breathedeeply.org. And that is going to be essentially an endowment fund that we're going to create as a family, that Damian allowed us to. He gave us the authority to do it before he passed. That will help scleroderma patients in the Duke, right, in the Duke University area, and that's up in the Raleigh Durham area.
Probably
So
done.
that'll be the initial focus, and then we'll expand breathedeeply.org to take care of other families, right, and scleroderma patients, and that's what Damien had, an autoimmune disease called scleroderma in other areas throughout the United States. But with that said, let's jump right into this topic. And so here you are, you're a young lady. You mentioned high school sweetheart. Um, let's talk about when you first met Damien and you got introduced to his autoimmune disease, scleroderma.
Um, so it's not something he talked about right away.
Yeah.
But that was one of his ways of explaining why his hands were scarred. So that's how I was introduced to the word scleroderma because I didn't know what it was. I never heard of it, never knew anyone that had it. But he had some scarring on his hand, and he explained to me that he had an autoimmune disease that he was diagnosed with called scleroderma, and it affects his hands. Um, and I want to say, I mean, he's mentioned that like maybe right away once I met him and we was hanging around each other. So that was his little way of kind of speaking on it, but not speaking on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he told you, that he had the disease, did you at that moment realize how unique this disease was, how rare, I guess I should use the word rare, this disease was, and then the potential impact on his life as you guys grew together?
So not initially. Um, because Damien was not a person that walked around with the I'm sick me. So it was kind of presented in a kind of nonchalant way. So I knew it was a autoimmune disease, but I didn't know how serious it was. It wasn't until mm, it wasn't until our first child, when we had our first child, when I started to ask more questions and his doctor visits, and he would normally go with his mom to those visits. So when moms and him would go, he would come back and let me know what the reports were, but still so nonchalant,
Yeah.
you know.
and
But
and so
yeah.
when your first child was born, and and you said you started to learn more about it. What was that? What do you mean by that?
So I started doing research myself, pulling it up, kind of trying to understand what is scleroderma. Um, and so basically, a lot of the information I pulled up, it was just talking about the, hardening of the skin can affect internal organs. It can affect your extremities. And it's basically an overproduction of collagen, and it's your body fighting against itself.
Yes.
So when I started to learn more, I remember he did mention, although he had scarring on his hands, um, they felt like there was a little on his lungs. And that was when we were in teenagers when he told me that. And
Wow.
he said that they would hear little crackling, medical field. They call it crackling when they're listening to it through the stethoscope. So they said they heard a little crackling on his lungs, so they suspected that it might have affected internally for him. So we have limited scleroderma and systematic scleroderma. My husband had both.
Well,
So
so wait a minute. So you can get one or the other or both.
right,
And Damien had. See, I didn't know this.
yeah,
So wow. So one, it's already a rare autoimmune disease.
right.
Um, and then you can either get one or the other, or both.
That's
Real quick, what's the difference? Do
so
you know what's the difference?
yeah. So systematic is basically your organs. Your heart, your lungs, your eyes, your liver. It affects your internal organs.
Okay.
Limited is like your extremities. You'll hear a lot of people that have it in their hands and their feet and arms. They might have it on their back. I've even known cases where they have it in their face. And even with that, because it's tightening, it's hardening.
Right.
So with people that get it in those areas, even in your face, you got to think as those muscles start to tighten up. I've known cases that where people suffocated from it.
Mm.
So it's a serious, regardless if it's limited or systematic.
Mm.
Systematic, of course, is going to be the most serious case of them all, but limited is your extremities. That's how people work. A lot of people lose functionality, um, because their hands start to not move, like they get stiff here.
Yeah.
So like Damien experienced that a little bit. He still had um, his his function with his hands, but um, you could tell like over years and years how limited that was getting for him. He couldn't bend his thumbs. He would get he had Raynaud's. So a lot of that with scleroderma comes along Raynaud's and RA, so rheumatoid arthritis. So he had
Right. And when would you say you really started to really notice that his health was starting to turn? In his late 20s, early 30s? Like when would you say you started to notice that?
so to look at my husband, which was always a big issue with people in the world. But to look at my husband, he looked healthy. No one look nothing. You don't look like nothing's wrong with you.
You
He
know,
got
like
a lot of that.
he would probably park in a handicapped spot and people would think he's bullet.
Yeah. Being questioned. Why are you parking there?
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I've had times where, I try to be calm and patient for the most part, but I've had times where I've blew up because, that might have been a high pressure moment,
Yeah.
and you don't know. We just left a doctor's office visit.
Right.
And here you are giving us the eye, like as if we're still in a park in space. It's a parking space.
Right, and of course, they're looking at you too. I mean, you guys look extremely young. I mean,
Yes,
little brother, had good genes, but and so I can kind of see that where you have this young couple.
yes,
They think you guys in your early 20s,
yes,
parking in a handicapped spot. and and he has both his
Taken away from
organs.
the elderly. Yes, yes.
Yeah, but they don't
Um,
realize that he has this disease.
this disease that's essentially attacking him, and he has no control. So, um, it was probably his early 30s. I mean, early 20s. I'm sorry,
Oh
early
wow.
20s when I started to see him slow down. So, Damien used to love to play basketball, and every family reunion, we had our infamous Fields family reunions every July. And, that's one of the things that, he enjoyed doing with his family, his cousins that he ain't seen all year or maybe since the last reunion. But that's when I could hear him start to complain, like, I can't even play. Like one family reunion, that's when he stopped. He was like, I can't go out there and play.
Wow, in his early 20s.
And he was 20, I wanna say we were probably he was 25, maybe 24, and I was 22, 23. Yeah,
And and I was so busy, in the Marines and that's why I'm glad I'm interviewing you is because you were with him a lot more than me after I
yeah,
left the house. But I just until this interview, I always thought that his health really started to degrade in his early 30s. But
mhm,
wow, so mid 20s is when he just said, I can't even really play basketball no more.
couldn't play it.
Mm,
Exertion, so that's when, the lungs were starting to really take its toll from the scarring, that was taking place from the scleroderma. So, you know, I mean, of course, he still walked around like it was, he was okay. I'm good. I'm all
right.
right. Because and the funny thing is, he worked for a company in the DC metro area, and he used to have to visit the because he was government contractor, so he used to have to visit a lot of the government buildings, and one of the buildings was the Capitol. It's a lot of stairs.
Mm,
Um, I want to say he was probably about 26, 27, maybe 27. And he asked his employer, I could do any other building, any other building in DC. I just can't do that one. Can y'all give that call to someone else? And I would do any other. You could send me in Maryland if you need to, because we
right.
worked, we lived in the uh, DMV area. So he was like, you could send me to Maryland, and with the traffic there, that's big to say to be able to volunteer to be sent anywhere. Um, and they would not accommodate that.
Mm,
So they told him if he has an issue climbing the Capitol stairs, then he possibly needs just to go off FMLA.
yeah,
So, that's when he decided that, okay, I can't do this job anymore.
right.
So now I need to go and look for something else. So he ended up getting another job. So that's what essentially came out of that was that, he the problem was, my husband's a lot of people don't know this, but my husband will walk and exert himself, and then he will have cough attacks, and then he will have to spend 10, 15 minutes just to recover from the cough attacks because of the exertion from just walking.
Right.
Something we all do normally, just walking. It
Yeah.
was just a little too long for him.
You, you,
Um,
every time I ran a physical fitness test in the Marine Corps, that's a 3 mile run. I used to always, think about him and just be thankful that I could run
yeah,
and knowing, not even realizing how severe his lungs were compromised,
right,
um, but just knowing that he couldn't run the way his
right,
bigger brother was running. So just listening to you, just
right.
remind me of how deadly this disease can be on the lungs. And so you talked a little bit about how you got familiar with scleroderma and how you started to see when it affected him, how it affected him,
Mhm,
um, and how you dealt with it. Uh, let's speed up. So we speed up to now. It's 2019, and Damien's on his last days from around January, Feb time frame until he passed away on June the 17th that evening, late night in Duke University. Talk to me about that. How was that for you?
Um, Numbing, uh, fear, um,
And you were by his bedside, I want to say, Andy.
every day, every day,
Yeah,
every day, all day. Um, mm, the only times I was away is when I had to tend to the kids,
yeah.
make sure that they eat, come home and take a shower.
And did you ever experience an emotional feeling where you you felt like you were helpless to help him?
Every day,
Yeah. And how
wake
did
up.
you get through that?
Um, didn't think about it in the beginning. When you're going through it, you don't focus on it. You just kind of just keep you get up, you push, you got an agenda to do.
Yeah,
So that was my agenda. My agenda was make sure my kids get off on a bus, get to school, go back to the hospital, stay there at the hospital, find out what the doctors and nurses have to say, stay here, come home, make sure the kids got home in the house okay, make sure they got dinner for the evening. For the most part, they was pretty self-sufficient. So they were feeding themselves lunch and stuff, and I just make sure I come home, just make sure the house was good, go
yeah,
right back up to the hospital, stay there until midnight. 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, I would leave and come home during the school week. So during the school week, Monday through Thursday, I would make sure I stay there till midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Get home, lay down, sleep, wake up, make sure my kids get off.
right.
Then I go right back up to the hospital because rounds were 7:30 because he was like, and I can count because I knew how many rooms and how many patients were filled. So they'll normally start at the first room. He was the fifth room. So I knew I had at least a 30-minute window. So I know I could get my last one on the bus and head right back up to the hospital. So I'll be there by 7:30. So I could sit there and listen to rounds.
Yeah.
Um,
And,
yeah.
and, and I would tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I actually went to go visit, Damien before he passed. And what Angie is showing you on this show is actually Angie. I mean, she is one solid cookie. And I'll use that cliche. But there were many times that here I am, the Marine Sergeant Major, big brother. And there were many times where Angie's like, you got to keep it together because I was losing it. So I applaud her for that. But there was one time where I walked in early in the morning and Angie was losing it, and I said, "You're about to make me jump out of the hospital." But I just want to say to everyone that what you're seeing is Angie. But I think one of the most important things, Angie, that as we get ready to go into this segment of the interview, is what have you learned and how have you been living without this handsome man named Damian Field
Oh,
and the
so
challenges?
so what I've learned is strength and patience and gratitude. My husband laid in that bed for 3 months and he had a smile on his face every day. And his strength was impeccable. Sorry.
Now you
His
good?
strength was impeccable because when you when you think someone is on their bed, they don't know. And this is like the last, you don't know this is the last, you're hopeful. So, for him to have so much strength
Yeah,
and gave so much, like he was leading us from the bed. Like even with all that, a man with all these tubes hooked up to him, he was still leading his family. That takes so much. That's a man. when you could lead your family from a hospital bed, he was directing us from the hospital bed.
Yeah.
And so my strength come from him because when I look back and I look back on the time we had those last, I got to say those 3 months, those last 3 months, and how he just, we talked a lot and we laughed a lot and we joked a lot about things. And but he also, gave me direction. This is what I need you to do if this has happened. If this happened, I will need you to do that. So like, how can I can't crumble. He didn't even crumble. And this was the last for him. This was his last. He probably knew but didn't know. He was hopeful with me. But how can you crumble when somebody is laying on their last and he's only 38, you know?
Yeah. No, no. And wow, what powerful, testimony, leadership while dying, no matter what, you can still lead and guide and influence, inspire and motivate those around you, even in your last days. And Damian Fields, he demonstrated that. You guys heard Angie say it, and he did it. Angie, what's next? What's the next? We're working together on Breathely. Breathe deeply. I always say breathely because I'm trying not to cry too much, but
Gotcha.
breathedeeply.org. What's next on the horizon for you guys in the team?
Well, the next step is to get the foundation up, help others, um,
Yeah.
let his voice be heard, even if it has to be through my voice. How uncomfortable I am to do this. But my brother-in-law, with his powerful words and inspiration, he said something a while ago, and it stuck with me, and then I even have it on my vision board. But you use the statement, "Get comfortable with being uncomfortable." So that's my motto. Angie, get comfortable with being uncomfortable because this is not it. And he didn't die in vain. And he had a reason. And it was a purpose and a reason for everything.
Yeah.
Um, so, and God, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
God did that for a reason.
Amen. I agree.
Yes.
Any words of wisdom that you could leave with spouses that right now have husbands, daughters, families that have people in their families that have been diagnosed with scleroderma. Any words of wisdom?
Mm, words of wisdom. I don't know about that, but what I could say is, I always say God gives his strongest soldiers the most toughest battles.
Yeah.
And when you look at your loved one and they're going through, just know that, that's an honor. I look at that as an honor. God think I'm this strong and he gonna throw all this on me. So, you know, do it gracefully and know that it's God's love over you. Whatever you go through, God's right there. So if you're religious, know God does everything for a reason and a purpose, and maybe there's something that you have in you that could help others. And if this only can help one person, that's all I care about. One person. And then that one person can help somebody else and let that be a trickling effect. If I only help one person, that's okay with me.
Right.
You I'm just here. So, know
Yeah.
know that life will be okay.
No. Well, thanks for those words of wisdom. Thank you for removing your armor to come on and discuss this very emotional topic. And I truly appreciate you, and I know that at least one listener and viewer will appreciate you too. Ladies and gentlemen, Angie Fields, my sister-in-law, my little brother's wife, with a wonderful family that she's raising, and I can't wait to see you guys soon. breathedeeply.org. Make sure you get your checkbooks ready because in 2022 we'll be accepting donations. It'll be a 501c3, so you get a tax write-off. Until next time, we'll see you later.